my buddy Mike Davis and I had a cup of coffee one day at Bolsa Mercado, and one of those little mini tour buses pulled up outside.
I think we've heard this. Yeah.
Oh, man. And it looked like the junior league from Plano or somewhere got off the bus, these little ladies, and they're looking through the window, and then they come inside and they kind of look around, and pretty quickly figured out they're on a tour. Somebody brought them on a tour of Oak Cliff from the suburbs. And we all kind of got, really like, what the hell? Get out of our party tent. What are you doing here?
You feel like an animal in the zoo. You're like, what are you doing here?
Fuck the subject in National Geographic.
Yeah.
Let's go take some pictures here.
Yeah.
God almighty, get the hell out of here.
Welcome to the Hidden City Podcast. I'm Grant.
And I'm Doug, and we're here to share some of the incredible stories and people from Oak Cliff that you might not know.
We're going to sit down with some of the visionaries, craftsmen, and business owners who have shaped Oak Cliff into what it is today.
Oak Cliff is on the south bank of the Trinity River, a few miles south of downtown Dallas. While technically it was part of Dallas, it was its own city for a long time, and it still has that independent spirit.
We'll dive into the history and the spirit of this place, exploring the different challenges and successes that defined it.
This is The Hidden City, a podcast about the people and the stories that make Oak Cliff extraordinary.
Welcome to this episode of the Hidden City Podcast. We're super excited today to have David Marquis here with us today in the studio. He's the founder of the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve. He is also the author of The River Always Wins and The River of Goodness, two parts of the three-part trilogy. David, thanks for coming on the show today.
I'm delighted to be here. I love being in Oak Cliff. I love being with Oak Cliff folks. And I love the Hidden City idea. That's a wonderful idea for a podcast, so glad to be here.
Well, thanks for being such an important part of Oak Cliff, and you've got a lot of good stories to tell, I'm sure, but one of the ones that we're super excited to jump into is the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve. This is obviously a big project, over 100 acres of land, and something that anybody in Oak Cliff knows about and has probably been to. Tell us a little bit about that story and how you came to be the founder of it.
It's a good story, if I just say so myself. And feel free to jump into the questions if you have questions along the way. But Laura Miller was an old friend of mine as journalists and writers in Dallas. So when Laura was on the council, she ran for city council, got elected to represent District 1 here in North Oak Cliff. And Laura called me one day at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, if my phone rang at 7 in the morning or 11 at night, I knew it was Laura. She's the only person who would call me at 7 or 11. And she called me and said, I need you to come to a meeting tonight. There's a developer that wants to cut down a bunch of trees and build some houses over in your neighborhood on the old Boy Scout property, because the property that is now the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve was a Boy Scout camp. The Boy Scouts wanted to sell the camp and take that money and put it into another camp further south. So when the word spread through the neighborhood, they were like, wait a minute, we all grew up on this property, going to Boy Scout camp, playing in the creek in 5 Mile Creek. So there are people really concerned about what was going to happen to that property. But the Boy Scouts were determined to sell it. So Laura said, I just need you to come and observe this meeting and tell me what you think. So I knew that there was real pressure from City Hall, not from Laura, but from City Hall, to get more economic development into Oak Cliff. And this was 160 acres of land. It was a quarter section, a section of 640 acres. It was a quarter section. And so I went to the meeting that night, which is held in the hospital, now abandoned, but a hospital across the street from the preserve. So I went, and man, it was one of those classic developer versus neighborhood meetings. Mm-hmm. Neighbors were shouting at the guy and screaming at him, and you can't cut down these trees. We grew up playing on this, and it was really a classic meeting. Folks butting heads and raising voices. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, this is going to be really interesting, because I knew Laura and the council wanted me to take this on and do something with it. But you could see the ire and the anger and hear it in their voices of the neighborhoods, because folks grew up on that property. It was special to them.
It's their backyard. This is their home.
And it was 160 acres of trees with 5 Mile Creek running across the bottom of it. So it ended with the developer kind of throwing up his hands and going, well, why am I going to do this? I mean, I'm getting yelled at here. But I knew City Hall was not going to be done with this. Economic Development Division, city manager, and others were like, we've got to get some growth in Oak Cliff. And it's true. Oak Cliff was a very depressed area at that time. And this is 1999. So I'd been in Cliff for 6 years, been in our house on Keast for 2 years. So I knew the neighborhood well, knew my neighbors well, and knew they were determined. So the next day I went out and started looking around the property, called one of the guys who worked for the developer because I knew this was not the end of it. There was going to be more fighting and acrimony. Something was going to happen. People were going to push. So it was the middle of August. It's hotter than
This
hell.
is a hot time. Yep.
So, you know, I grew up in West Texas, grew up on the land, and I put on what I call my Gandhi boots. The boots I'd worn to India and South Africa and Nicaragua and El Salvador and all over the world. So I put on my Gandhi boots and got my walking stick, big walking stick, and went out and pushed my way through the cedar breaks and, I mean, down to the creek, and I'm sweating like I'm, you know, born in hell. And I just keep pushing through, trying to get to know that land, because there was no Google Earth in those days, guys. You know, I mean,
You're exploring.
Yeah, there's no trail. You're
no.
going just into the
it's
wilderness,
it's
basically.
160 acres of trees.
Yeah.
So I'm pushing my way through this. As I push my way through this, a remarkable thing happened in my life, one of the most remarkable incidents in my life. I'm pushing my way through the cedar, sweating like crazy, thinking, why am I out here? Why am I even thinking about doing this? And then a red-tailed hawk flew over me. I mean, skimmed me, came very close, and landed in a tree about 20 feet away, and turned around and looked at me. And if you ever get close to a hawk, they're big birds, and they've got some serious eyes. And this hawk looked me in the eye. I mean, looked me dead in the eye. And I thought, I get it. This hawk is saying to me, if you cut these trees down, where am I going to live? Where are these other critters going to live? So I have a saying now, which I've had all these years, is when the hawk looks you in the eye, pay attention. Wow. So I paid attention. That was the moment where I thought, I'm going to do this. I get it. I'm going to take this on. I'm not sure how this is going to work, what we're going to do, but I'm called. I felt called in that moment to do this. So I told Laura I'll take this on, and she and Barbara Miller at Caraway both said, we got to get you a task force. We've got to do this deal in such a way that everything is done with neighborhood inclusion. The Planning Commission's got to be involved. We have to change zoning. City Council's got to be involved. So I thought, oh man, what have I got myself into? So I put together a really good small task force,
Yeah.
very diverse from our neighborhood. And I got a phone call from the city manager, who was a friend of mine, Mary Soom, now retired. Great city manager. Mary was strong. I had known her since I lived in Allen, Texas, while I was teaching school in Plano in the early 70s. So I'd known Mary since I was in my 20s, and she was in her 20s. So Mary called me and said, hey, look, need you to do this. We got to get some economic development out of it. I know you care about nature deeply, but here's some things we just need to get out of this deal. So because Laura and Barbara asked me, and because Mary asked me, I began to see the whole of this. So I sat down with the developer and I said, look, stop talking about bulldozing the trees. That ain't going to happen. That's not going to happen. But in my explorations of the 160 acres, walking around out there, I found acreage in the northwest corner of the property that was second growth scrub cedar. And that comes when you try to farm property like this. This is chalky soil over here in southwest Oak Cliff.
Yeah.
This is not farmland.
Yeah, it's super chalky, and
It's chalky, yeah.
the trails over there too.
Oh,
You can
man.
see it.
Yeah, exactly. So the rock is just under the, an inch of topsoil. So I looked at this second growth scrub cedar and thought somebody either tried to graze this and overgrazed it, or they tried to farm this, because the rest of the tree stock was pristine. I mean, oaks, pecans, elms, ash trees, cottonwoods, all these magnificent trees. And yet this other acreage just was.
It was not.
It was not. It was not. So I thought, oh, we can look at this piece of it, and we can talk about developing this piece. So I sat down with the developer and I said, I think there might be a way to do this, but forget about building tract houses. Not going to happen. What else could you build? So we had the discussion about how we could cluster the development into one corner. Then we began to look around and thought, where are we going to get the money? Because if we get the money to change the zoning so we can build senior affordable housing, Now, a lot of people don't like affordable housing, but the truth of the matter is, we needed new housing for senior citizens because a lot of this neighborhood was aging out in those days.
Mm-hmm.
People were moving out of their houses, going into assisted living or nursing homes, and there's a lot of turnover in the neighborhood in those days, a lot of young people moving in. So we needed some place for our seniors. So there was that. And then there was also the thought that, okay, if we're going to change zoning, what else do we want to go with this? Well, we need a new library. There was an old library at Hampton, Illinois, which is very small. So we needed a library, and the city had some bond money that had already been passed for a new library for our neighborhood. There was no location for it yet. So we thought, oh, we can get a library of the deal. We told the developer, if we need a library, the city's going to pay for it, but you have to give us the land. If we're going to help you get this money to buy all these acres, you're going to have to give us this 4 acres on the corner. He wanted to give us 4 acres further down into the preserve, in the gully. We're like, no, we ain't taking that land. You give us this good land up here on the corner.
Yeah.
And where that is now the Hampton, Illinois Library.
Which one?
Hampton, Illinois Library,
Illinois,
which I
really?
think is the second busiest library in the system,
Oh,
in
wow.
the whole city.
That's
So
cool.
we put the deal together in such a way that we found all these different elements to come together. I got a call from a guy who was from Oak Cliff. He's been on the Plan Commission, been on the council, great guy, who shall remain nameless. But he called me and said, I got a tip that there's $1.25 million of federal money available. It's called HUD Section 108 money. It's called Neighborhood Stabilization money.
Yeah.
So I looked into this, and sure enough, HUD in Fort Worth, where their office is, had this neighborhood stabilization money. So I had some really good conservation working with me on this task force. These conservationists had found a study from Stanford that showed that any neighborhoods that were surrounded by or adjacent to a green space increased in value or stabilized in value. So I can make my case to a guy named JJ. I can't remember his last name to save my life. His name was JJ. He worked for the federal government in Fort
Okay.
Worth. And I said, JJ, here's what I can prove to you through this study. And I'd also researched a guy named John Crompton, who was a professor of real estate at A&M. He's the guy that did all this research for years in the real estate value of green space. All the way back to a place called Birkenhead Park in London in the 1600s, I think. That was the basis for the model for Central Park in New York City.
Wow.
Well, where's the most expensive real estate in New York City?
Yeah,
It's across
around
from Central
Yeah.
Park.
Yeah. The green
So-
space.
Yeah, exactly, the green space. So Birkenhead Park was the basis for this. We got the study from Stanford. The late, great Polly Shields, a wonderful conservationist, found this study from Stanford. She lived in Lancaster and put together a nature preserve there. And I luckily found a guy named Michael Young, J-U-N-G, lawyer here in town. Great guy, brilliant guy. Former chair of the board of the Texas Land Conservancy. Michael was a land use expert and zoning expert. He spent 2 terms on the Plan Commission. So I said, Michael, I need your help. We're going to have to find some way to document this and put this together because we've got to create a conservation easement or deed restrictions, and property's got to change hands. We've got to guarantee that the land we're going to allow the developer to develop. It's all he gets to develop. The rest of it has to go into the conservancy. So we began to figure out how we're actually going to nail this thing together. So we gave the developer the opportunity to change the zoning to include the multifamily, to go to the state to get the bonds to build the affordable housing for seniors.
Mm-hmm.
We got the city to agree to spend the bond money to build a library there on that site. We allowed the developer to sell 10 acres to the school district on Hampton for what is now Brashear Elementary, because we need a new elementary school because young people are moving in.
Right.
And along the way, and this is all happening starting in August, I get a call from the city manager saying, Dave, the $1.25 million from the feds goes away December 31st at 5 o'clock. We started in August.
Yeah.
So we're putting together a major real estate deal in a zoning case,
That needs to happen immediately.
In a few months.
Yeah.
which usually takes years.
Right.
But I saw this was an opportunity. This was the carrot and the stick. I made that task force meet 3 times a week.
Yeah.
I mean, again and again and again. Here's the next step we have to take. Get a vote, move forward, call people at City Hall. Here's what we did. And I even got to the point, I developed what I call stir the pot. Because we're trying to keep everybody at City Hall involved and excited and moving forward, right? In the neighborhood. Having neighborhood meetings like crazy to explain what we're doing to people.
Yeah.
Meeting with Laura, meeting with Barbara, meeting with the city manager. But periods of time would go by where there wasn't much new to report, but we had to keep the energy.
Yeah.
So I call people on the phone and just say it faster and louder. Stir the pot.
It worked.
This is great news. Let me tell you what's happening. This is something. I said the exact same thing I said the week before.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's great news. And then hang up before they can think about the fact.
Doesn't even matter what you said.
No, it's not anything new.
Rhetorical tool there. I like it.
Yeah, stir the pot. Say it louder and faster. So we're going through the fall.
That's funny.
We're drawing up legal documents. We're having neighborhood meetings and explaining to people what we're going to do, how this is going to work, getting the state to agree to the bonds, and figuring out the zoning, and just continue to push and push. Morning News came out and ran a big article about it. And began to figure out what kind of private deed restrictions we would need to make this work, because you have the school district, the city with the library, the state with the bonds for the affordable housing, the feds with their money, the developer with his private money, and I've got to balance all these folks.
It's a lot of different stakeholders.
Yeah, oh man. So we had a meeting at Kimball one night, and I thought, I'm going to have a paper vote. We're not just going to have a hand vote, by a show of hand vote. We're going to have a paper vote. So we took paper ballots. And because there were a few naysayers, like, affordable housing, we don't want that in the neighborhood. And I'm like, look, this is deed restricted, and it can only be for people 55 or over. Because we'd done some research. We already had more than our what's called regional fair share of affordable housing in Southwest Dallas.
Got it.
So we took these paper ballots, and we won by 63-3. So I went to the Plan Commission and the council. I took the ballots and said, our neighborhood's in favor, 63.
Hear the actual
to
ballots.
Yeah, hear the actual ballot.
Almost
to 3.
unanimous. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly,
that's
exactly.
incredible.
So we hammered our few opponents. But we did that, and the remarkable thing was we made this developer sign these deed restrictions and sign these covenants, because we weren't going to let him do this until he had signed all those covenants.
Right.
And he did not appreciate a neighborhood activist making him come to City Hall.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
And here's the crazy story. This is funny. We're waiting to take the vote at Plan Commission. And then from Plan Commission, we've got to go to council for the last council meeting of the year. So there's no margin for error here. Once the council is adjourned for the year, that money runs out December 31st. And the council meeting, I think, was December 14th, 99.
It's coming down to the wire.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So I'm standing at the back of the chamber with Michael Young. We've got the documents, the contracts laid out for the developer to sign. And I said, dude, we're not going forward to the vote till you come down and sign these things. Ain't going to happen. Oh, he was ticked off, this neighborhood activist. Told him to come down and City Hall and sign these documents.
Yeah, no kidding.
And one of our friends on the Plan Commission would come out from behind the horseshoe and go, what's up? What's going on? And I gave him a thumbs down. I kept giving him a thumbs down, like, hold the vote. Can't take the vote yet. And the developer got there, and the lawyer handed him the pen and showed him where to sign.
That's
And the
wild.
guy signed the documents. The Plan Commission member comes out, I give him a thumbs up. They take the vote. We win.
That's awesome.
2 weeks later, we go to council, win again.
And
And here's another funny part. We got to council. The last council meeting of the year is always a marathon. They got to get all these things done before the end of the year. So Ron Kirk, former mayor,
Yep.
we went to college together.
Oh, okay.
We're fraternity brothers. We're still good friends. I
Nice.
talked to him last week. So I'm going to get up and testify about this. And this meeting's running along. It's our last meeting of the year. About to adjourn for the year. Ron looks at me and taps his watch. I said, got it. So I get up and in 20 seconds, say the neighborhood there got the balance. The neighborhood approves this 63-3. Everything's lined up, documents signed, and they took a vote right at that moment. And
Moved
was
it
done.
quick.
It was
Yeah,
done.
that's awesome.
And then on December 31st, 1999, we sat around a round table just like the one we're sitting at now, and signed the documents so that the land went to the developer, and the developer signed 120 acres over to the Conservancy.
that's unbelievable.
And we just literally signed the documents, passed them around the table.
That's amazing.
And the Oak Cliff Nature Reserve was founded 4:45 p.m.
Wow. Oh, you know the time.
Oh,
yeah,
we came down to the
4:45 p.m.
wire.
Yeah,
because by the
yeah.
time because there's a
Yeah.
stack of documents a foot
Yeah.
tall.
Yeah.
about this.
Wow.
But
That's
what
amazing.
that's what it took to get the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve funded.
That's an amazing story. For those who don't know about the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve, can you describe it a little bit
Sure.
to people who
You
haven't
bet.
visited? Because everyone should. It's amazing.
Thank you. It is a premier urban nature preserve. It fronts on Hampton and also on Pierce, runs down to Keast, and then all the way up toward the hospital, where the library is, the Hampton Illinois Library. 120 acres of open space. Then there are the apartment complexes for the senior citizens. Then there's the school, 4 acres. The school is 10 acres, the library is 4 acres, but it is in that rectangle of Hampton, Pierce, Keast, and I believe that's Perryton. And that's where the preserve is. The entrance is on Pierce, and it is a great area of trails cut into the preserve. And for a while, we thought about just leaving it only for the critters.
Wow. Yeah.
Then we thought, well, no, hold on. This could be really a great place for people to get out of the city
Yeah.
and feel like they're in nature.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing for people. It also helps us politically because when people get to enjoy a place like that, it helps them want to vote for something else green.
Oh, yeah.
So we
that's a good point.
strategically wanted people to get on the preserve. Dallas Off-Road Bicycle Association, NORBA,
That's right.
the organization that created the trails. And we've had a lot of visitors over the years who come down and feel like they are out in nature again, and they are. 120 acres. So it's a very special project. One of the things I'm proudest of in my life, and I'll tell you this, for years I've gotten phone calls from conservationists around the country asking me how I did that, how we put the deal together. And I've been asked to lecture about it at SMU and other places and tell the story of how we founded the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve. But it was a lot of work in a very short period of time, and we got it done. We got it done with the help of a lot of good people, Charlotte Compton, Carl Hartz. I'm naming some of the members of the task force. Just a lot of great people. Donald Seelheimer, who were involved in that and who came to a meeting after Charlotte Barbosa, Michael Penn, people who were
And a 7 a.m. call from Laura Miller.
7 a.m. call from Laura Miller saying, I need you to come to a meeting.
That's pretty
Like I
amazing.
said, I know
Yeah.
Laura for years as a journalist.
Yeah, that's amazing that you said you knew the city manager, you knew these people, that Ron Kirk even, that you're friends with them. That's amazing that
Well,
you were able to sit in that position to take this on.
I'll tell you something. We talk about infrastructure all the time. I have a phrase called blue, green, gray infrastructure. We talk about infrastructure as being gray, concrete, bridges and roads and so on. But green infrastructure, trees, parks, so on. But I also talk about blue infrastructure. I write about water a lot, obviously. But blue infrastructure really counts. But I'll tell you, the infrastructure that matters the most is human infrastructure. Infrastructure, and I'm, as a writer, I take words apart and look at them. Infra means beneath or below. Structure comes from Latin struere, or struere, which is a verb that means to build. So infrastructure actually means to build something beneath us that we can stand upon that supports us. And human infrastructure, relationships, really matter the most, because when you have relationships, you can reach out to people and say, hey, here's what I'm working on. I could use your help with this. So develop your human infrastructure, your relationships, because you never know. Like with Mary Soom, she was the city librarian of Allen, Texas in 1975.
Yeah.
Later became the city manager of Dallas, Texas.
Wow. Yeah.
So she and I could really talk real with each other.
No
Hey,
kidding.
here's where
Came
we're
up
at.
together
Yeah,
a little bit.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very similar in age, and we've known each other since 1975, I think it was, 74 maybe. And, human infrastructure counts a lot. And that human infrastructure, those relationships, made an enormous difference in being able to get that project done in that period of time.
I mean,
Sure.
you said
Yeah.
started in August?
Yes.
So that's sort
Started in
of,
August.
we're talking like 4 months,
Yep.
basically. That is
Yep.
lightning fast
Yeah.
and to think of all the different stakeholders. I mean, you've got a private, public, you've got the city government involved. That's an
Yeah.
incredible undertaking.
We had city, state, federal money involved, and private money involved. And it was just a project that once the hawk looked me in the eye,
Yeah.
I knew there was a purpose to this. And those hawks are, still hawks and all kinds of bird life and animal life out on that preserve. We created a place where those critters could survive and thrive. And I'm glad I did it. It ate my life alive for a long time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've used that as a model to teach other people how to do similar things.
And I'd be curious, do you tie this even to, is it the 12 Hills? Is that similar in nature? Because that's another part in Oak Cliff that you played a role in, correct? Or
It was interesting in that
yeah.
the 12 Hills folks called me and said, we heard about what you did with the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve. Could you come talk to us? So I went and sat down with the folks interested in doing that project and said, here's what we learned and here's what we did. Here's how we did it. And the how of creating the preserve really mattered. Because when you deal with zoning and land use, it gets very arcane. I mean, really specific set of laws. So the ability to help them learn how we did what we did was very helpful to them in 12 Hills. So I don't claim to be the founder of 12 Hills by any means, but I did spend time with those folks teaching them what we learned, the lessons of the Oak Cliff Nature Preserve, so they can move forward on that project.
Was there a conservation easement involved in that project as well? Or is that...
No, well, the 12 Hills, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I sat with them for a while and then said, if you need more information, call me.
Yeah.
But, it's y'all's project.
Yeah.
With Oak Cliff Nature Preserve, we really used deed restrictions.
Okay.
Because they're enforceable. The judge will enforce deed restrictions. And so we're in a process now of re-examining what we want to do there, how we move forward. It's just such an exciting project to think that, out of a phone call I got one morning, I'm eating my, bowl of Wheaties, and we move forward.
Yeah.
Based on that. So, but
amazing.
The lessons we learned and what I learned from Michael Young, I cannot emphasize enough what a great guy Michael Young is, and his knowledge of land use and zoning really came in handy because he's a brilliant attorney and a great guy, and has been a stalwart member of the Plan Commission here for many years. I think he's rolled off now due to term limits, but he's a great guy and has done great service to the city.
That is an interesting part of, I guess, the advocacy activism side, is that you do have to, there is a way of communicating that can be effective or not effective. And I mean, I would think with your background too in performing, how you present that information to somebody is just as important as what you're presenting, I would think.
I owe a great debt to a wonderful teacher named Mamie Porter. Mamie Porter was my high school speech teacher at Lubbock High School. I was an athlete, until I got 9th, 10th grade. Still was. But my parents made me take a speech class. Said, no, you got to do this. You got to take a speech class at some point. So I did. And Mamie was years ahead of her time. She understood it wasn't just about getting up and making a speech. It was about developing the whole person. And I was 16 years old, and she sat me down and said, I think you have something to say to the world, and if you want to learn how to do that, I will teach you. When I played the Kennedy Center in 1989, we flew Mamie up to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And I brought her up on stage after the show, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
Yeah.
I introduced her to my high school speech teacher. So Mamie is the one who taught me to say it so they can hear it. Know who your audience is. Who's in that audience? How do you need to speak to them? What can they hear from you that they will understand? So for me, from that time in high school, I've seen everything not just as a performance. I mean, I don't perform when I'm having lunch with a friend. But if you're speaking to any group, you have to consider who the audience is, what you want to communicate, what you want to accomplish. Back in 2015, we carried some legislation to the Texas legislature about water and water recycling. So went down, the great Yvonne Davis, Texas legislature member from here in Oak Cliff, brilliant woman. She carried the legislation for us and went down that day to testify. And I looked at that panel and looked at this room full of people, all of whom were going to testify that day. And people have got pages of notes they're going to read into the record because it's their big shot to read into the record, I'm thinking, don't do that. I went back to all my training with Mamie. And frankly, I was a championship extemporaneous speaker. I mean, you put me up in front of anybody and give me a moment to prepare, I know what to do. I grew up on stage. So I'm looking at these members of the legislature sitting up, behind the the head table in this room. And I had, a long speech prepared, and I'm like, don't do that. Choose 3 things. Because these guys got to listen to all these other people the rest of the day. And Yvonne arranged for me to go first. So I'm like, take advantage of this. So I chose 3 things. I did a 3-minute one-man show.
Mm.
It was a show to me. In 3 minutes, 3 things I was going to do. When I finished, the chairman said, that's good testimony. And somebody else said, that's the best testimony I ever heard. Because I didn't get up and read to them and put them to sleep. I chose 3 things and went for it. So that training in high school, Lubbock High School, man, that made all the difference in my life. Because you can put me in front of any audience anywhere and talk about anything. And I'm at home. It's the most comfortable I ever am. So I learned it from Amy Porter. I've used it in the Texas legislature, used it at the Kennedy Center, used it in front of the Dallas City Council.
When you were saying even earlier the storytelling at the folk festival in Kerrville.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
When I got out of college, I taught school for a couple of years in Plano, east side of Plano, Bowman Junior High School. I still hear from those kids. When I perform, they still come see me.
Oh, cool.
50 years later.
Wow.
My students still show up to come hear me. So, I decided after a couple of years, I really needed to go out and find a bigger classroom. I was always butting heads with the superintendent of school in Plano those days. I was a very creative teacher and pretty unabashed in my point of view. A student was always removed from my classroom because her parents thought I spent too much time talking about Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement. And this was a brilliant young woman, my student, and she was very embarrassed by what her parents did. They took her out of my class. And I'm like, I'm not backing off. I'm gonna tell the truth here.
That's a good call, yeah.
I'm going to tell the truth here. So I just decided I had to go find a bigger classroom. So I began to speak and to write books. And the Kerrville Folk Festival heard about me and said, well, why don't you come down here and be an official storyteller? Because American Airlines Magazine, all airlines used to have in-flight magazines. And they ran a big article about me as a storyteller. So I got invited to go to Kerrville. So what we didn't realize was all the folk acts would get up and sing, and then they get to go off stage for a while. Well, I was the only storyteller there. So I'm underneath an oak tree in blazing sun on Memorial Day. I told stories for 3 days. I told stories that I made some up, then I made some others up, then I told some
You're
of the
just
first
telling
ones again.
stories.
Oh
You're
my
telling-
God.
yeah.
3 days, I stood underneath an oak tree in 100-degree weather and told stories. It was great fun, and I'm glad I did it. But it was also pretty exhausting. But, experiences like that help define you as a performer, that you kind of find out what you're made out of. There's
Maybe.
times like that.
Yeah.
So-
3 days.
Oh, man, it was really something. But, yeah, I can actually make a claim to having been the official storyteller of the Kerrville Folk Festival
That's awesome.
in 1976.
That's awesome.
Not everyone can say
That's
that.
awesome.
It's
Oh,
pretty
let
cool.
me tell you, talk to Mary Soom, the former city manager of Dallas. I worked with on Oak Cliff Nature Preserve. Mary was in the stands in Allen, Texas, where we both lived. On July 4th, 1976, I developed this one-man show about the bicentennial. So Alan said, hey, look, we know you're speaking all over the country. Why don't you come speak to our 4th of July? So, 4th of July in 1976, this bicentennial was a big deal. So I'm standing on the stage in the middle of a little high school football stadium. They've now got this $2 gazillion football stadium in Allen, but in those days,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
a tiny town. There were 2,500 people in
Yeah.
town. Just
Yeah.
lived in a little grandstand. And I'm out there with a microphone, broiling sun, in the middle of 4th of July, did this show about the bicentennial, about America. So that ability to step into any venue anywhere is something I value because I feel comfortable in front of any audience anywhere, anytime. But that's, and the Kerrville Folk Festival was that way. And I've had some moments that are just kind of transcendent. I did a show called The Land about land conservation. But we toured in 05, 6, 7, and 8, all over the place. Played the Tennessee Performing Arts Center in Nashville for a big national convention, did California, all over Texas. And there's a scene in that show that comes from my real life about having been on the plains of eastern Colorado as a huge storm came in on the plains. And I got out of my little rental car and got up there to perform in Greeley, Colorado. And I'm driving around eastern Colorado, and so this storm is coming across the plains onto the national grasslands up there. And I get out of my car and I wanted the storm just to wash over me, and it did. So I'm standing in the middle of this field. Probably could have struck by lightning. You know, the tallest thing around for, 100 miles probably. It's huge grassland. But I did that. I stood there and let this rain wash over me. So go to 2007, and we're performing at this theater on the banks of the river outside Austin. This guy made a fortune in video games, and he built a replica of the Globe Theater
Whoa.
in Austin on the banks of the river.
Really?
So we're doing my Plate of Land is a big fundraiser of this conservation group down there, Hill Country Conservancy. And man, the musicians are out doing kind of a warm-up set, and rain comes out of nowhere. So they've got to bring the instruments in, and we're backstage with the producer and the director. We're like, hey, when this rain lets up, we got to do this show. These people paid a lot of money to come to this fundraiser. And we're doing this for a good cause. We're raising money for conservancy in Hill Country. So the rain slacked up, and we went out there and did the show. It was still misting. And we come to the scene about the storm rolling over me in eastern Colorado. And we start to hear thunder and lightning in the distance.
Oh, wow.
I'm standing on stage thinking, you can't buy these sound
No,
effects.
this is real. This is real.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And the audience gets it like, damn, he's talking about a storm coming in. He's doing this show in a storm.
The storm's coming in.
It was
Yeah.
amazing. There's other
that's
moments
fun.
like that as a performer that, man, you just don't forget those moments. Those are just magic. Just magic. So
You also had a one-man show called I Am a Teacher, and that you went across the country performing that one as well. Is that correct?
for many, many years, that's the one most people probably know me from.
Could you tell us a little bit about that one?
I will, and it's starts with a heartbreak. I worked with a lot of different kind of kids up in Plano when I was teaching. Some were, had challenges, had troubles. Young man that I worked with a lot and got him on a better path. Really invested a lot of myself in him. He came from a tough background, and he was shot to death. Somebody lured him outside a Plano High School football game on a Friday night, shot him to death, and left his body in the street. And it broke my heart. And I looked down into his coffin at the funeral a few days later and swore he was not going to die in vain. Several weeks later, I sat down and wrote the first draft ever of I Am a Teacher. He died in October 76. Early January 77, I wrote the first draft. Began to perform it, but it was still so hard and so raw that I put it down, went back to it again, and by then, so many people were asking me to come perform it. Because teachers were really under fire in those days, the public schools were beginning to have challenges. So over a period of years, I wrote 3 different versions, part 1, part 2, and part 3, spanning the life of a teacher. A 9th grade American history teacher named Ben James. I was a 9th grade American history teacher. So the young teacher, idealistic, full of hope and drive. The middle-aged teacher, becoming cynical, but still willing to stick it out. And then the teacher near retirement, trying to decide if he's got one good fight left in him. And that show played 40 to 50 states, played the Kennedy Center, had IBM, Kodak, Bank of America as corporate sponsors. Did a book with Simon & Schuster called I Am a Teacher, which was a Critics' Choice in Time magazine. Had a 6-page spread in Newsweek magazine. Became the basis for the Be a Teacher, Be a Hero public service ad campaign, which at that time was the most successful public service ad campaign in the history of the Ad Council. So it was a project that had real impact over many years, and which I performed at the Kessler. Edwin and Lisa Cadmus, very close friends, and I helped them with the Kessler and then later with the Longhorn. But I did the show at the Kessler, part 3, and Edwin will tell you to this day, it's one of the best shows ever in the history of the Kessler. And he told me once that the only thing he ever saw that compared to I Am a Teacher was Brian Dennehy in Death of a Salesman on Broadway.
Wow, I mean,
So, and it was a
it's
strong
quite a
show.
comparison, yeah.
Well, I Am a Teacher just had an enormous impact on people because it was very straightforward about American teachers and American education and what we're taking out of our teachers and what we're asking our teachers to do these days. But that play is probably what I'm best known for because I toured it forever all over the place. But we had enormous impact. When I played the Kennedy Center, a member of Congress came up and said, I have to rethink the way I vote on education now I've seen your play.
Talk about impact, yeah. That's
so,
direct impact.
And it goes back to Mamie Porter, who taught me how to write and perform. Told me when I was 16 years old, you got something to say, I'll help you learn how to say it. So, I remember that teacher in life who made the difference. Because Mamie Porter's the one that made a difference for me. And I'll say this also, having performed at the Kessler many times, that's one of my favorite venues.
No, it's amazing.
I performed in, so many of them. I'll tell you a story about Edwin. I got a call one day from a woman named Carol Reed. It's back during the Tom Dunning campaign when Tom was running against Laura Miller for mayor. I was kind of running the ground campaign. Carol did the media buys and all that kind of thing. I was doing a lot of the groundwork. I like the trenches. That's where the action takes place. And so Carol calls me one day and says, there's a young guy that I think you ought to meet. He lives in Oak Cliff, and he wants to be involved in the campaign. His name is Edwin Cavanis. And I think he wants to be involved. I think maybe you could mentor him. So I'm like, okay, have him call me. So I get this call from this young guy. And he said, just tell me what to do, and I'll go do it. I really want to learn about, campaigns and how you do this. And I'm like, okay. So, I get requests all the time to mentor people. And you find out pretty quickly, are they serious? Are they going to do the work? Are they going to, are they going to come through? So Edwin would call me at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I would give him a list of things to do, data we need or information or call this person or do this. And I think, that'll keep this youngster busy all day. He'd call me back in an hour. It'd all be done. And done well.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, who's this kid? So that's how I got to know Edwin and Lisa. And then, Miss Lisa at that time had, the best dance studio in town, and she's retired from that but since. But, my granddaughter studied, ballet and dance with Miss Lisa. So, so the Cavanises have been very good friends. And we met, I guess that'd be 2001, we met on the campaign. And then in 2008, I guess it was, in the summer, Edwin called me one day and said, hey, come on over. I want to show you some blueprints I have. So I go over to their house. And he rolls out these blueprints. He said, this is this old theater up on Davis. It's called the Kessler. And we're thinking about buying it. I'm like,
amazing.
Like, you want to do what? He said, Gene Autry used to own it. It was a movie house. And what do you think? And I was like, because by then they'd seen me perform.
Yeah.
They'd seen some of my one-man shows by then. So I said, well, let's go look. So we got in this car right then and drove over there.
No way.
It's this empty shell of a building, hot July afternoon, I think it was. And I'm like, yeah, you can turn this into something. We walked around and looked at it, and my mind started reading and thinking about all the venues I'd played. So they started talking about what a good venue is. And then in January, 5-6 months later, Lisa and Edwin and I got in a car and drove to Austin to see Jerry Jeff Walker at the One World Theater, the late great Jerry Jeff. So on the way down there and on the way back, I talked to Edwin and Lisa about venues. What it's like to be a performing artist on the road. How the green room really matters.
Yeah.
Having a shower and a clean bathroom and a sofa. Because that's your home away from home when you're on the road. And I said, look, guys, you can paint the lobby anytime. You got to get the acoustics right and the green room right. And they listened and asked questions all the way to Austin, all the way back. They took all that information and turned it into a really special place. Yeah. One of the best venues in the country.
It really is. I mean, we recently spoke with Diana, who is now the VP over at Kessler Presents. And it's funny to hear you say that, because that was one of the things she was most proud of, is
taking care of
the
them.
green room and the way that artists feel about the space, not just how everybody. I mean, obviously, when you go, it's an amazing show. Yeah. But I love that that tie-in. That's a fun connection point.
Oh, listen, one of my favorite moments ever. My 65th birthday party was at the Kessler.
What a place to have a birthday party. I love that.
We put together a 5-piece band and an 8-member choir. And great director, the director who directed my play The Land, came in to direct this. Pam Myers-Morgan, great director. So the great Nikai Bay was on piano, and he put together this great band. And a guy named Nigel Rivers, who was Erykah Badu's bass player. So we put together a great band and a great choir that we called the All Souls Human Being Choir. Recruited some great singers. So we're upstairs in the green room. I've got the musicians. I think there were 13 or 14 of them, and my director and I are in the room. And we're going to open the show with Amazing Grace. So I'm surrounded on my birthday by 13 great musicians and my director, and they are rehearsing Amazing Grace in sotto voce, in soft voice, in the green room at the Kessler. And you talk about a moment that just uplifts your spirit and gives you chills. these great musicians and singers are singing Amazing Grace in the green room to Kessler. Well,
That's pretty special. That's
Edward and Lisa,
special.
get the green room right.
Yeah.
On my birthday, they're singing Amazing Grace to me.
It's amazing.
That is amazing.
It's a special
Full
place,
circle.
man. I've performed there many times. And I love the Kessler. It ranks up there with, I've told Edwin this. Kennedy Center, Kessler. I mean, it's, some great venues I've played, but I love the Kessler. It's a great place, and especially the fact that it's in the cliff.
Yeah, that's great. And David, you've been here since the 90s, you were saying? Or was
Yeah.
it, is there any stories that come to mind when you're thinking of Oak Cliff? Anywhere from Jefferson to Davis that, comes to mind?
Oh, sure. Well, first, let's give the audience a real sense of where Oak Cliff is.
Yeah,
because
I love that.
so many times you hear people talk, well, we love to be in Oak Cliff in South Dallas. I'm like, no. First, let's give, credit to South Dallas. It is an historic neighborhood surrounding Fair Park, and it's a special place. But South Dallas and Oak Cliff are two different places. And when we would have candidates, especially mayoral candidates, come south of the river, and we'd check them out real quickly, because they talked about, well, it's good to be in South Dallas. We would call them out. So you're not in South Dallas, you're in
This is
Oak
Oak
Cliff.
Cliff. Yeah.
It's a different place. And Oak Cliff is not just North Oak Cliff. Oak Cliff is 35% of the landmass of the city. The same amount of population.
Did you say 35%?
Yeah, of the landmass.
It's a lot. That's a lot.
I knew it was
No,
huge.
no, it is.
Yeah.
It's huge. Oh, it's enormous.
35% is a
Well,
lot.
if you go further south and east, way down into southeast Dallas County, there are 63 square miles of unincorporated land in Dallas County. 63
realize
square
that.
miles, yeah.
Yeah.
So the cliff is huge, and then you add on that part,
Yeah.
way down there Singerville. This
Keeps
is a
going.
vast area. But for me in the cliff, we moved here in 93. We've been in East Dallas for many years. Moved over here in 93, found our place where we are now in Keys in 97. And we began to see pretty quickly that Oak Cliff had become separated, in part by Highway 35 being built, and the separation of East and South Oak Cliff from North Oak Cliff and Southwest Oak Cliff, and began to see what a remarkable area it is, because we have such a diverse population. We've got magnificent hills and trees and bluffs. We got oaks and we got cliffs. And I tell people, if you want to see the prettiest part of town,
It is,
this
yeah.
it. And then we see these goofball people come down here. God almighty. I was in Bolsa, Mercado. Remember Bolsa and Bolsa,
Oh,
Mercado?
sure. Yeah, of course.
Also great.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Used to go over there, my buddy Mike Davis and I having a cup of coffee one day at Bolsa Mercado. And one of those little mini tour buses pulled up outside.
I think we've heard this. Yeah.
Oh, man. And it looked like the junior league from Plano or somewhere got off the bus, these little ladies, and they're looking through the window, and then they come inside and they kind of look around, and pretty quickly figured out they're on a tour. Somebody brought them on a tour of Oak Cliff from the suburbs. And we all kind of got, really like, what the hell? Get out of our part of town. What are you doing here?
You feel like an animal in the zoo. You're like, what are you doing here?
Fuck, a subject in a National Geographic
Yeah,
article,
yeah.
Let's
Like,
go
what are you
take
doing
some
here?
pictures here.
Yeah.
God almighty, get the hell out of here.
yeah.
So
That's
we
crazy.
see things like that, come
Yeah.
down here. And then there are a lot of folks who moved down as the older neighborhoods began to clear out from just aging out. The old white and black families who settled Kimball and other neighborhoods down here for a long time began to age out. So we came when those folks were still around. Then we saw the transition of more young people come in, white, brown, black, gay folks, a real variety. So it went from being mostly black and white to being even more diverse. But we saw, it was just unreal to see some of the young folks come in and not understand how special this was. There was a guy in a red Jaguar with a bumper sticker that read, "Keep Oak Cliff Real," who cut me off in traffic one day near Beckley. And I saw this youngster in a red Jaguar with a "Keep Oak Cliff Real" bumper sticker, thinking, what are you even doing in Oak Cliff? Just get out.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I had time, I'd get out this traffic light and beat the whole out of this kid. Get out. What are you doing in a red Jaguar cutting me off in traffic?
With
And
a
have that
bumper sticker.
Keep Oak Cliff Real.
Yeah.
God almighty. So we saw these Some of these people come across the bridge, we're like, please go back.
Yeah,
Please, just go away.
Yeah.
We don't need to be here.
Yeah.
But we saw that kind of stuff all the time. There's a story. I'm just going to roll in some stories here.
Go,
There's
yeah.
a story about a guy from Plano was invited to a party in Kessler Park. Kessler Park,
It's nice.
county, upscale place. So this guy's from Plano. He gets invited to a party. So he takes a cab. His friends in Plano go, oh, you're going to go to Oak Cliff? Oh, dangerous. Are you sure you want to go? So he takes it. This was days before Uber.
Yeah.
So he took a cab from Plano.
All the way here?
Yeah, all the way here. Because he's afraid something
He
happened to
didn't
his car.
Yes.
In
It's
Kessler
scary.
Park.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
In
Please
Kessler
go
Park
home.
of all places.
Go away.
That is
God
funny.
almighty. Jeez. I mean, what are you even doing here?
No.
Go home.
Yeah.
We don't want you. Just please, just leave. Go home. Stay away. Yeah,
That is
yeah.
too funny.
Yeah, so there are a lot of stories like that about people who show up down here and we just shake our heads and go, oh, God almighty, just go away, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine you've seen it change
Oh, yeah.
in good ways and bad ways, like you're saying. But
It is both. I mean,
yeah,
we need economic development, and it's interesting how the transition took place. For a long time, there were two women in the Bishop Arch area who had different shops, who in some ways kept the place going until the redevelopment started and the tax base took off. They were Caroline Razor and Sarah Tillman. Caroline had O-Lines, a hair cutting salon, near where, just a door down from where Zen Sushi is now.
Okay.
Caroline Razor grew up here, went to Kimball, wonderful human being, died of cancer, way too young. 06 or 07 maybe,
Okay.
been some years ago. But boy, in North Oak Cliff, that's where a lot of folks went to get their haircut, men and women both.
Yeah.
You could walk in there and
Start,
and just see everybody. I mean, Plan Commission, City Council, business people, everybody in there. So Caroline and Sarah Tillman, she had Tillman's, which is where
Tillman's Roadhouse,
where Chimichurri's is now.
Was that Tillman's Roadhouse? No, was it? Or,
Yeah. And Sarah was Stevie Ray Vaughan's girlfriend in the 8th grade. So there's some real history there. And their places lasted for a long time. There's also Jenny's Bishop Grill where Hunky's is now. But it moved. It was a chicken fried steak place, really good, but it moved. So Sarah and Caroline kind of kept things going. What was later became Hattie's was a furniture painting workshop. Vera Cruz was a tiny little insurance agency. There was a little police substation. And that was about it. All those places were boarded up. There's nothing there. There was a great place called the Bishop Arch Cafe, I think, which is a really nice little restaurant. If you go into Oddfellows now, you notice there's a little dip in the floor. Well, on one side, on what would that be, the western side of it, there was a little art bookshop, card shop, and then on the other side, there was the restaurant. Well, that place went away. Then there was a guy named BJ, this African-American guy, who was a great chef. He told me he learned to cook in the Navy stationed in New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
And he had a Cajun restaurant. But he was 5 years ahead of his time. There wasn't enough foot traffic at that time to keep it open. But you'd go in there and the place would be jammed with people, scarfing down etouffee and gumbo. This guy could cook. But he was too soon. Then Vito's came along, which was an Italian place that really caught on. There was a Dream Cafe in Oak Cliff in those days.
Really?
There's a Dream Cafe over here?
Oh, yeah. Over here on Zang, where Zang and Beckley come together. Dream Cafe, right there by Colorado. And then there was Nodding Dog, where Whitehall Exchange is. And where Bolsa was, where Encina is now, Bolsa, before it was Bolsa, was a place that had a snow cone stand, a barbecue stand, and a body shop.
There you go.
In
that
one
corner.
place.
In one place.
That corner. Yeah.
That was the cliff.
That
That
is
was really
awesome.
the cliff.
That's the cliff right there.
And the original Glorious was in a little building down where the Amity Bank is now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was original Glorious. So,
Okay.
so many of the young folks come now, look and go, oh, look how much it's changed. Well,
Yeah.
go back a few years.
Yeah,
It changed
even
even
more.
more.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
more. But those were great days in the cliff because there's so many urban pioneers and people coming across the river into settled neighborhoods. Kessler Park is not a new neighborhood. That's an old neighborhood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's about as old as it gets.
The historic district. It's a
Yeah.
really old neighborhood.
Yeah.
So these are neighborhoods that have enormous history to them. We still do have some of the elders around who can tell those old stories, but we talk about Kimball and Carter and all those folks, but you got to remember Adamson was here first, and Sunset, You know,
Keeps
Sauk,
adding. Yeah.
South Oak Cliff High School. I mean, these were great schools with long histories. So it's been a long and beautiful history, but people need to remember they didn't invent Oak Cliff.
Right.
It was already here. It was already a cliff. And it's a very special place, and we need to honor that. We need to honor it by understanding how big Oak Cliff is, how diverse it is, and make sure we remain that way, make sure we remain tolerant and open and welcoming, even when people come here with bad ideas.
Except for the guys in the Jaguars, right? The
Oh,
red
man,
Jaguars.
please.
Well, David, I feel like that's an amazing spot to stop at, and we're so thankful for the work that you've done here and the legacy you're leaving with the nature preserve, and it's been awesome. It's been a good time on the show.
No, listen, I've really enjoyed it. Be glad to come back if you want to get into even deeper dives into history around here. This is a great neighborhood. I love what you guys are dealing with. Thanks for being here and for the renewal that you're bringing, and let's keep on.
Let's do it.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Hidden City. We hope you discovered something about Oak Cliff that you didn't know. If you enjoyed the show, I hope you subscribe to it on YouTube and then follow us on any of the podcasting platforms. Also, if you enjoyed it, please share with a friend, and thanks so much for tuning in.